And what does it take to truly change? And what is change? And why is change so hard? And over the last 10 years or so, my company has a research team, and we have done scientific studies on what it takes to truly change. Is there a formula that you can demystify the process? That most people, they wait for crisis or trauma or disease or diagnosis or loss. When they reach their lowest denominator, they finally make up their mind to change. And my message is, why wait? That we can learn and change in a state of pain and suffering, or we can learn and change in a state of joy and inspiration. And we are literally in a new era right now. And this era is about information. And in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. We don't need a doctor, a teacher, a governor, a priest, a rabbi, a minister to gain information any longer. Because we have access to information, people are taking their power back. Technology affords us the ability to research anything we want to research. And every time you learn something new, you make new synaptic connections in your brain. In fact, learning is making new connections. And the Nobel Prize laureate Kandel in the year 2000 found that when people learn just one bit of information and they concentrated on it for an hour, they doubled the number of connections in their brain from 1,300 connections to 2,600 connections. But if they didn't review that information, if they didn't think about it, if they didn't repeat it over and over in their mind, those connections pruned apart within hours or days. So if learning is making new synaptic connections, then remembering is maintaining and sustaining those connections, keeping those connections in a long-term relationship. And this 4-day retreat is an opportunity for you to gain information, to retreat from your lives, and to break from the routine, mundane way that you do things long enough for you to begin to learn new information. And that information then begins to become installed in the circuitry in your brain. The question is, though, what do you do with that information? That if you can then take that information and apply it, personalize it, demonstrate it, initiate it in some way, if you can get your behaviors to match your intentions, if you can get your actions equal to your thoughts, if you can get your mind and body working together, you're going to have a new experience. An experience then enriches the philosophical circuits in the brain, laying down networks of neurons. And the moment those neurons string into place, the brain makes a chemical. And that chemical is called a feeling or an emotion. And the moment you feel like a leader, the moment you feel more unlimited, the more you feel gratitude from some experience, now you're teaching your body chemically to understand what your mind is intellectually understood. And we can say that knowledge is for the mind and experience is for the body. And in that moment, you are embodying the truth of that philosophy. And for one moment, your mind and body are aligned to a new destiny. And it is the environment and the interaction in the environment that actually changes genes. And we've measured this, that in 4 days, people can change their genetic expression if they begin to think differently, make new choices, do different things, create new experiences, create new feelings. They will change their genetic destiny. So then, in that moment then, if you've done it once, or if you're training somebody to modify their behaviors, and they're able to do it once, then they should be able to do it again, yes or no? And if you can repeat an experience over and over again, you'll begin to neurochemically condition the mind and body to begin to work as one. And when you've done something so many times that your body now knows how to do it as well as your mind, now it's innate in you. It's second nature. It's easy, it's familiar, it's automatic. You're beginning to master that philosophy. And so we have studied brains in change. We've done over 8,500 brain scans, and we now know there's a formula that you can teach people to change. We work with CEOs and companies all over the world, from Coca-Cola to Google to Sony to Cisco to Pfizer, in an interest to work with upper management to teach them a model of change. And when you change individuals, you can change a culture. So then, my interest then is to not only measure just the brain, but we also know that it requires 2 ingredients for a person to begin to make a significant change. Number 1 is a clear intention, a vision, an idea of the future. And when a person begins to select a new idea in the future, if they can begin to emotionally embrace what that future is going to feel like, because they're so caught up in their inner vision, they begin to feel an elevated emotion. An emotion like gratitude, an emotion like inspiration, an emotion like motivation. And you can actually measure what happens to the heart when this occurs. So then when a person starts feeling the emotions of their future in that instant, their heart begins to respond very differently. And we've measured this. The heart begins to become more coherent. It starts to beat in a more rhythmic pattern. And that by living by the emotions of fear and resentment and frustration and impatience actually causes the heart to beat out of rhythm. And people spend 70% of their time of their lives living by those stress hormones. Living in stress is living in survival. So the fundamental question is, can you teach people then how to create a more coherent brain? And can you teach them how to regulate their heart and be able to control how their heart responds? And our research shows that that's absolutely possible. And you don't have to be a Buddhist monk. You don't have to be a nun with 40 years of devotion. You don't have to be a minister, a scholar, an academic. That common people can learn how to do this. The side effect of this is that they begin to produce changes in their immune system, changes in their gene expression. Diseases go into remission. We start to see people having very transcendental moments that begin to redefine who they are. So then a clear intention and elevated emotion allows the person then to begin to see a new possibility. The question is then, can they sustain that state? Now, your brain is organized to reflect everything you know in your life. Your brain is a record of the past. It's an artifact of everything you've learned and experienced to this moment. So most people wake up in the morning, and the first thing they do is they start to think about their problems. And those problems are memories that are etched in their brain. And those memories are connected to certain people, at certain places, with certain things at certain times. And the moment they begin to think about their problems, we could say that they're thinking in the past. Now, every single one of those problems has an emotion associated with them. So then the moment they think about a problem, the brain turns on circuits that are connected to the past, and then all of a sudden they start feeling unhappy. They start feeling unworthy. They start feeling fear or anxiety. Now, thoughts are the language of the brain, and feelings are the language of the body. And how you think and how you feel creates your state of being. So most people start their day from a state of being that's completely derived from the familiar past. And when people live in the familiar past, they will create a predictable future. And then they get up and they do a series of routine automatic behaviors. They stretch, then they grab their cell phone, they check their WhatsApp, they check their text, they check their email, they check their Facebook, they take a picture of their feet, they post it on Facebook, then they tweet, then they Twitter, then they check the news, and then all of a sudden now they're connected to everything known in their lives. And then all of a sudden they go through that same routine behavior. From waking up, getting a cup of coffee, taking a shower, driving to work, and they're in a program. And then we could say then their body is dragging them into a predictable future based on what they did in the past. And 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old is a set of memorized behaviors, emotional reactions, unconscious beliefs and perceptions, hardwired attitudes that function just like a computer program. A person has a thought or a reaction to something in their environment, and then they go unconscious. And so people in the midst of change are trying to use 5% of their conscious mind to work against 95% of what they've memorized subconsciously, because they've been doing it for 10 or 20 years and their body is on autopilot. And we can say then that person has lost their free will to a program, and they're headed for a genetic destiny. So if we're not defined by a vision of the future, then we could say then, for the most part, we are living by the memories of the past. And we could say then, a person who's in this state believes in their past more than they believe in their future. It means they're romancing their past and more in love with their past than they are with the future. That they're telling the same story of their past instead of telling a new story of their future. And the latest research in neuroscience shows that memory is creative, which means then 50% of what you talk about in your past isn't even the truth, that you make stuff up. That means that so many people are reliving a miserable life that they never even had. And they do that because it reaffirms their identity. Now, so a person then, if they wake up and they feel like a failure, the moment they feel like a failure, they're going to think thoughts equal to how they feel. They are going to think they're a failure. And when they think thoughts that are related to failure, they create the same chemicals in their body to feel more like a failure. And the brain's checking in with the body, and the body says, yeah, you're really a failure. And then you start thinking more thoughts. And this cycle of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking conditions the body to subconsciously become the mind of that emotion. And the body, as the unconscious mind, does not know the difference between an actual experience in your life that creates an emotion and an emotion that you're creating by thought alone. The body is believing it's living in the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.